to Aspects of Writing. I'm your host, James Kelly. My co-host for today's show is Janet Corsi, and our panelist is Joyce K. Gatchenberger. Our guest is Paul Brodie, and the topic of the show is Making the Connection, Networking. Paul, I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from and what do you do?
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Paul Brodie. I am a book publisher, book marketer, and executive ghostwriter. And the funny thing is, it all started with a health crisis I had 7 years ago. Oh. So I had a checkup. Doctor was telling me I was borderline 340 pounds, high blood pressure. I was right on the area of spectrum for having type 2 diabetes, and made it very clear that if I don't get my act together, that I will be dead in the next 5 years. So what I did was I got my act together. I lost 60 pounds and kept off most of that weight. And I wanted to share that journey with other people to help them. So I ended up having this book in my head for 4 years. And I kept putting the book off over and over and over. So finally, ironically enough, I'm on a flight to Las Vegas for an annual family vacation. And I had this huge epiphany. And I thought, why do I keep putting this book off? So many people now are getting their books published. I know I can do it. I just need to get started. So the next morning, I'm at the Mirage Hotel and Casino poolside, and I actually typed out the entire outline of my book into my iPhone. A week later, I wrote 20,000 plus words, had my first draft, and then I had to figure out, okay, now I needed to figure out how am I going to get published and how am I going to get this book marketed? So I spent the entire month of July, and I would say anywhere from 14 to 16 hours a day, learning everything I could about the publishing process, but more importantly, the marketing process, because I knew if I didn't have that marketing knowledge, then that book was going to disappear into the Amazon rainforest. So long story short, I had the book published. A month later, it became my first bestseller, and it was called Eat Less and Move More, My Journey. My second book was based off of a motivational seminar called Motivation 101, which ironically enough, I just gave in Dallas this past weekend. The third book was called Positivity Attracts, which was also based on a motivational seminar. And I chose to do those books because I wanted to build up my public speaking business. And then the funniest thing happened. I started to have readers and fellow authors reach out to me, and they asked me, hey, can you help me get published? And I thought, sure. I mean, at that point, I was teaching for quite a few years. I knew I could help with the process. So I started to coach people one-on-one for a year and a half. And I was still teaching at the time. I was teaching special needs. And it got to a point where I had to make a decision. And I did. I actually left my teaching job about a year and a half ago. And now I mainly focus on publishing. And I took all those one-on-one clients into a group coaching program called our Book Publishing Implementation Program. We created done-for-you book launch marketing services and publishing services. And just by writing that one book with having a health crisis, and now I was able to completely change my life and have the privilege to help people get published across the world.
Well, so tell us a little bit about your family.
My family. So I am the proud parent of 2 dogs and 2 cats.
Good. Like that.
Yeah, and so they keep me busy throughout the day. I have the privilege to help with taking care of family as well, so I'm very proud to do that. One thing I always emphasize, this is in the books and seminars, is family is everything. Yeah. Because without family, we have nothing. So for my family and my faith, there are things that are very important to me, because as I always say, without our families, we're lost.
And we're talking to you from Texas. Where in Texas are you?
I am in Arlington, Texas, home of the 5-time Super Bowl champion Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
We actually have the stadium, and I believe they're facing the Redskins this weekend. So I'm a lifelong Cowboys fan. We also have the Rangers here. We have a couple of other franchises, but very proud to be from the Metroplex. I was actually born in England and moved over to Texas when I was 5 years old, and was very proud to go through the schools here in Arlington. Went to university at UT Arlington, where my slogan was "Yes, you can." 10-year plan. And graduated with my degree in 10 years, but debt-free. And then I went and got a master's degree in teaching as well after that. So it's been a great journey.
All right. So again, our topic is making the connection and networking. And so when did you start the company? I mean, I know you wrote the book, and that's what kind of led you down the road. But where did you say, okay, it's time for me? You self-published, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And then from there, you grew. Yeah.
So January 2016, I formed Brodie Consulting Group. And that was our publishing arm of the company, where we could help people get published. We could help them with the coaching. And that has grown to the point now where we're doing executive ghostwriting. We also have a podcast called the Get Published Podcast as well. So it's really grown to a point now that we really do have the outlet to get out there throughout the world and just to share the journey. And if we can help people get published, great. And if not, maybe we can at least take you into the right direction. Because one of the things I always talk about is core values. And as a person and as a company, you have to have core values. And ours is a Latin phrase, which is veritas et utilitas, which translates to truth and service, or to truth and helpfulness. And that's always been my life philosophy. And that's also my company's philosophy as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're talking about networking and how you make those connections. And it's interesting. We're going to talk a little bit about how you connected with us, because it is an interesting world we live in today. We just got off the phone a little bit ago with someone Michał Stawicki, and he is in Warsaw, Poland. And he came through Mimi Emanuel, whom you also know, who Mimi is in Australia. And it's an interesting circle because I didn't know you, and I didn't know Michał as well. But all those connections came together through one person. What's really interesting is I met Mimi through someone else in Australia who happened to just find me on the internet. So connections are very important, making those connections and networking. And I know that's what you do. We kind of got that impression from Michał. That's what you do as well.
Yeah, so it's so funny how it connected. Mimi was one of my first clients. Okay. She was one of those people that reached out to me and go, "Can you help me in my journey?" And I had the privilege to help her with both of her publishing books, wrote the forwards to both of them, and also helped her implement her marketing strategy in both of those books as well. With Michał, the funniest thing is I've known him for several years with his books and his journey, because he also was doing self-help books like myself. And we kept connected, and he reached out to me summer of 2017. And I was actually his first client, because he does Amazon marketing services, and he does campaigns for your books. So I was actually his first client, and he's been able to build that quite significantly ever since, because I recommend him to all my clients. He does a phenomenal job. He's fair, he's honest, and he's direct, which I love dealing with people who are direct and to the point. Yes. In that way, there's no messing about.
Yeah. Yeah. So the connections are amazing. And when you do a podcast, so when it comes to getting guests on your show, how do you network that?
I love to use LinkedIn. So what my team does is we reach out to authors in six countries: Italy, England, New Zealand, Australia, the US, and Canada, because that's also my client base. Because obviously we want to give great information, but we also want to focus on our base. And those are the base from my clients are those 6 different countries. We reach out via LinkedIn. We make connections. We invite for them to come on the show. And we only have 2 little rules. One is that you either have to have published a book, or the second rule is, or you have to be thinking about getting your book published. You're in the process of writing it. And then we tailor it based on there. So we've released at this point 60 episodes. We have 167, I believe, now that we've actually recorded. So we have a lot of episodes.
Marvelous.
So yeah, it's grown significantly to the point now where we actually publish 5 episodes a week.
Wow.
And I think we just got over 11,000 downloads, which is not too shabby for a show that's only a few months old.
Absolutely.
Well, and the other thing with that too is able to build relationships, because what I also want to utilize the podcast was to build relationships, but to learn. And one of the biggest things that I learned is even people that have been traditionally published, and we've had all across the gamut you can imagine for people on the show, but it amazed me having all these people that have been traditionally published, and they were telling me, with the exceptions of Penguin and Random House, even those people that are traditionally published, they are still expected to do the most of the marketing for their books.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yes.
That's absolutely right. Paul, you're right.
Yeah. It was mind-blowing. So then they're asking me, well, do you help with marketing? I said, yes, we actually specialize in that. So we were able to find a nice niche market where we can actually even help people that have been traditionally published, and if not them, to help others. Because I firmly believe every single person has a story in them.
Yeah.
We all do. It's just the challenge is, how are you going to communicate that? So it's one thing I always want to teach my clients is you don't necessarily even have to write a book. You could actually download the Rev Audio app, download it to your phone, hit the record button, think of 10 different talking points, focus on one talking point at a time, almost like a question, focus on that, come up with about 10 to 12 minutes of audio, and then have it transcribed. And there you go. You have the basis for one of your chapters. And the reason I mentioned that is it doesn't have to be difficult. The main thing is just done is better than perfect. And don't be afraid to take the plunge, because we all have stories out there.
Right.
We just have to get them communicated.
Right.
Yes.
And you know, that's what we have editors for. I mean,
right.
it really is. I took some
Exactly.
courses in Emory University when I was in Atlanta, Georgia. And one of the ladies who was head of the course, that's what she taught us. She actually had an author, Mrs. Tucker, who wrote 2 books. And both books went on to be major sellers, and both were made into Lifetime movies. But when she read the rough draft, it was handwritten in a spiral-bound notebook. And she thought she would never going to wade through it. But once she got through it, she said, this is a story. So then they obviously transposed it onto the computer. And then from there, it was sent out to a publisher. So it doesn't matter how you're writing, what your background is, put it on paper, and then find an editor.
Yes.
You're right. You're right. Paul, I want to ask you a question and back up just a minute. I know you said you were on the plane. You had an epiphany from your physician about your health, and then you decided to focus your energy into writing, publishing, but you had had another career before that. It sounds like you were a special needs teacher. What made you decide to go and focus your energy towards writing and publishing? You could have been an electrician, you could have been an IT engineer, you could have been a variety of professional gurus, as they say. What made you choose networking, publishing, writing?
I've always believed that you should follow your heart. And when things open up in life, you should always take those paths. And that's what happened. I was a teacher for 9 years. I taught English as a second language for my first 3 years. I ran an after school program for 3 years. And then I taught special needs. And I actually started to write during that second year of teaching special needs. But I always knew that teaching was something that I wasn't going to be doing forever in that role. So when I wrote the book, that was always something I wanted to do. And then just all these doors just started opening up, public speaking opportunities, coaching opportunities. And it just led me into a new direction where I was still able to teach and help people. But instead of teaching kids, now I was teaching adults and helping them in their journeys to get published.
Well, and I think part of what you're saying also makes sense too, because you said you started doing speaking engagements and so forth and so on. And I think that's where you probably made a lot of your connections as well and started networking to build what you have now.
Well, and a few other things that we did as well is I knew immediately that we needed to run the book like a business. So in the very first book, we had offers in there to download the audiobook version of the book or to download a PDF file of our upcoming book to build our list. So by the time that we got going, we already had several hundred people on our list, and we were able to build and cultivate relationships with them because it was those readers that were reaching out to me and people that were also in our Facebook author groups. Mimi and I were part of a mastermind group on Facebook. So she was reaching out to me. Scott Allen was reaching out to me. We were building those relationships, but also doing that with the list as well. And that's when we saw the need to build these relationships to support each other. And here we are several years later, and I get to hang out with some friends in Vegas.
Yeah.
That's really great.
So you're saying to network with people that have a like interest and share your passion and just use your energies.
Absolutely. I always say iron sharpens iron and real recognizes real, where you make those connections and you bond with them. And I'll tell you the funniest thing is my editor was a fellow fraternity brother. We're part of a co-ed fraternity together. And she actually came to my Positivity Attracts seminar several years back. And we always kept in contact. And she mentioned she does a lot of administrative work. She's been my editor for all 13 of my books, about to be 14 books. And she also does a lot of admin work for me now as well. And that was through a connection from someone who I met at a conference that was part of my business fraternity. So it's just amazing how these relationships, how the universe kind of brings everything together.
Yeah. Go ahead.
The way I met James was I worked at a major hotel here in town, and I met a gentleman that worked with me, and he had written a book, and he was telling me about this book he had written. And about 11 years later, I decided to write a book. So when I wrote this book, I didn't know which way to go. I had sent all kinds of applications and queries to publishers and never heard a word back from any of them. And then I thought about this guy, and I looked his book up online, and I got a hold of him, and he introduced me to James. So it's funny how you do meet and connect with people. And now that I've met James, I've met a plethora of people that's from every direction in the world.
That's right.
So you just need to keep connecting with more and more people.
Yeah, it is amazing because it is networking that actually created this show as well, Paul.
Yeah.
Because what happened with myself is that I saw a friend of mine from another hotel had come to me and said, I have a friend who wants to write her memoir, and she wants to know if you can help her. So I actually went in, kind of like you with ghostwriting. I went in and I helped her put the whole project together, and we did the editing, we did the layout, everything. And I always do a book launching with every book that we do. And we did a book launching, we do a cocktail hour, then dinner with the author. And during the cocktail hour, I had invited the media and people from different outlets. And someone from KLAV, which was a local radio station, came in, and the executive producer was asking her, how did you do this book? You self-published it. How did you go about it? And we're talking a few years ago now. And so she told her, I think you need to ask James because he's really the one who did all
Yeah.
See?
And then they said, would you like to talk about this on the air? And I had never thought about radio. It actually scared the death out of me to even think about it. And I thought, well, let me go see what I can do. And out of that, this show was born. So the networking is unbelievable what it can do for you. And actually how it can change your life in the sense that you're going to be doing things you may not have even envisioned, 2 or 3 years or 5 years down the road.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, like Paul said, too, you find a niche that you're good at. You connect with somebody who can add to that niche, and they add their expertise, and before you know it, you get something that you never thought you had before.
Right.
Yeah.
And how did your podcast come about, Paul?
I wanted to build up my brand a little bit more. And one of my clients, his name is Billy Atwell. He actually has a podcast. It was called Fear Not. And now I believe it's called Unshakable Self-Confidence. I was actually a guest on his show about a year ago. And we were talking after the show because, when you do podcasts, you have a pre-talk, you have a post-talk afterwards. And we were talking about this idea he had for his book. And long story short, we ended up working together. I helped him. His book was not only number one for a week, it was number one for 6 months. And I think it's 2 different categories. So he was absolutely thrilled. We stayed in contact. Just an awesome guy. I'm proud to call him a friend as well, as in addition to a client. And he kept telling me, he's like, Paul, you have to do a podcast. And I'm going, Billy, I don't know anything about the equipment. There's a lot of different things. Technically, he's like, it's not that difficult. I'll walk you through it. And he actually walked me through the process. And the next thing, once we got the podcast going, it was second nature. After we got out all the bugs and all the curveballs, because we had a bunch of them starting the show. But once we got the show started, it was great. I mean, to me, it's fun. I spend a couple of hours a day, 4 days a week, having conversations with awesome people from across the world. And the funny thing is, my next book is basically based on how to create your own podcast. So it's just funny how it connects.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it is interesting too. We were talking about it just before we connected with you. Joyce was talking about what we do here in the studio. Because for 4 years, I worked at KLAV. I didn't do anything. I basically just went in and I sat down and I hosted the show. We had someone who operated the board. We did have someone who did the videos as well, because we were still doing videos even back then. I didn't put anything out on the network. I didn't have to worry about how it was distributed. So, and there were times when you're thinking, I did put the script together, I did do this and that, but that was really very easy.
Yeah.
When I look back now.
Now that you're doing it all.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then when we went off the air, because they had changed to an all-Hispanic network, so I had to figure out what am I going to do now? How do I get this show back on the air? Because I'm very passionate about it. We actually do help a lot of authors. We've had authors on the show. I've seen them grow over the years. It's amazing. And so I thought, what am I going to do now? So I went out and bought my own equipment. I thought, I'm going to do this. Now, it's not elaborate equipment. It's just simple little mixer type thing. And I thought, how can I do this? And it was amazing. And what I really liked was the connections that I had made with the authors over the years. Because when you're at a station and you do a show at a station, people view you differently.
Of course.
So when you go out on your own and you create your own little studio and you're telling them, I've still got the show, you want to come to the studio? And they go, where is it? And I go, well, I have this office and I have this, you know.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, you're not at KLAV anymore? No, but why don't you come on by?
Mm-hmm.
And the best response I've gotten from everyone that's been on my show that had been on the prior show is how much more comfortable this is.
Yeah.
You know, it's so much easier to sit here and do this show this way. We don't have to worry about signals, someone signaling us, we're almost off the air or we're going on or we have to do a break, you know.
Yeah.
We get to go at our pace, and it really makes it so much more fun and enjoyable. But what I love is the connections I've made over the years and how these people came back and helped me get this show off the ground again.
Yes. Because at the very beginning, when you started this, there were some glitches.
Oh, absolutely.
And one show we did 3 times to finally get it right so that the audience would fully appreciate the work that goes into it.
Yeah, yeah. So the connections are important, and I'm going to tell you what's really interesting too. When you were talking about building your business, and you had talked about trying to understand how to get out there and market. We have a friend who actually was on this show, and he had published his book, but he had nothing. He had no author's website. He had was not on Amazon, didn't know about ebooks. He had absolutely nothing. But he was considered the book published because it had been edited and typeset and ready to go, and it looked very professional. It looked great.
Beautiful.
But now how do you go out there and market this book? What do you do now? And it's amazing to see how you have to put that other hat on. And it's amazing to see how he went out there and he took that and he ran with it, and he's doing well. But we don't think about, you can't just write the book. You have to publish this book in a way that you now are marketing it, and you're out there talking about it and telling people about it and finding out how do you, like with me, how he goes out there on Amazon and helps the clients, you know, get the book discovered. And that's the part people don't think about when they're writing.
And even though it is a writer's nightmare almost sometimes to actually physically write every single day and discipline yourself, sometimes the writing is the easy part. Making the connections to the publishing and the typesetting, as you were saying, and the editing and the advertising and the marketing and the networking, that's where the work really starts when you're talking about writing and authoring. Yes. Yes. And Paul, I'm sure you found that too.
Absolutely. And I think one of the main things is as well, you really do have to have 2 different hats with this in regards to publishing and in regards to marketing as well. And that's why when I was learning this process, 50% of it was learning publishing, but the other 50% was learning the marketing side. Because as I mentioned earlier, the last thing you want to happen is to put your heart and soul into a book and then have it disappear into what I refer to as the Amazon rainforest.
Yeah, I love that term. I love that term.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, you have millions of books that are out a year. And let's face it, if you don't invest, a good amount of money into it, and if you don't utilize that, because you have to spend money to make money, and you have to market your book. And what we do is we work with over 20 different book promo companies, and we have it in the system. And that's one of the main things. It's a system that has been effective for all of my books and also for all my clients. But you have to have 3 keys. You have to have a great looking book cover with a book title that's going to grab the attention, and a strong subtitle that talks about the benefit of the book. That's the first key. The second key is you have to have a compelling book description to help sell the book. But the third and the most important part, and we've already touched on this, you must have a well-edited book, especially if you're going to do this yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. When we talk to authors who are writing, we also tell them that the number one thing you need to worry about, in addition to what you said with the cover and the synopsis and all that, is also make sure that you have it well edited. That's the hardest part for people to understand. And to be honest with you, for self-published authors, that's usually the biggest expense. And what they fear the most is, how can I afford this? Well, you just have to afford it. You have to figure out a way. If you have to make payments and you find someone who will take payments, then
Or if you put the book away for a whole year
and wait until it's edited.
And
yeah.
every month you just write yourself a check for X amount of dollars so you have enough money at the end of the year to just pay that editor.
Yeah, editing is really is
Yes.
key.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't
Well,
matter if you have a
yes.
good cover and a good back. If you present it out there and it doesn't read well, you're not going to, get good reviews.
Right.
Well, and I want to bring up one other point too, and that is, how can you afford not to do it?
Right.
That's
Yes.
one of the biggest things I tell prospective clients. How can you afford not to invest in the market and when you want to use this to grow your business? 70% of my clients are business owners that are using the book as the foundation of their platform. My other 30% are fiction authors, children's book authors, cookbook authors, but that 70% are people specifically looking to have that book as a foundation for your business. Well, when you have a foundation of your business, you have to spend money in advertising. You have to be able to invest in your brand, because if you don't do that, then what's going to happen to your business?
So,
Right.
how important to you, as far as for what you do, how important, or would you advise someone to seek out an agent or a manager?
If they want to go the traditional published route, you can do that. But a lot of times you can create your own query letters. You can do internet research. You can reach out to people. You can take courses on Udemy where you don't necessarily need that. It's the same thing with PR. They're nice things to have. But if you do your own research, you can actually do that. We do PR releases through our company that we actually don't utilize a specific agent. We have specific strategic partnerships. But the whole point with that is, I think the main thing that you need to have is just have a great story and don't be afraid to put it out there. And I would say at minimum for your first book, go out there and publish it yourself. And if you want to go through Wiley or Random or Penguin down the line, fine. But at least go through the experience yourself, because the way publishing is these days, it's not that different with self-published versus traditionally published, at least for the smaller to mid-range companies, with the exception of maybe a little help with distribution. That's really your only differences versus the big 5 or the big 6.
Yeah, and with distribution today, you go through Ingram Sparks and you've got a distributor, because I know Barnes & Noble won't carry you. They don't want to carry your book in the store unless you distribute through them. But you can do that as a self-published author. You don't have to go through a traditional publisher house
Right.
to get your book in the bigger stores.
Yeah.
Well, and another thing too is, think about it. Where do most people buy their stuff from?
Internet,
Online.
What website?
Amazon.
Yes.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Where are most of the books? Amazon. That's where the party's at. So you want to go where the party is.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, and we were sharing with Mihal as well, and I know he does it. He told us that he actually publishes through Draft to Digital, and that's another company that's doing well with getting authors out there on the internet, and they can get you everywhere, all over the world, and all the different ebook platforms. So, and it's good to have that exposure to where you're not just on one platform, because there are some people who don't go to just Amazon, or they don't go to just Barnes and Noble. They actually do go out to Kobo, or they go out to Bibliothèque. There's a lot of places they go to read a book. So you need to get your book out there on all the outlets.
Right.
Don't just focus on one outlet.
I would agree with that. What I would also mention is this. Typically for my clients that want to get out there for Barnes & Noble and everything else, I still recommend that for the first 90 days, you go on Amazon and to go through KDP for the first 90 days, because that's where you're going to get the lion's share of your sales on the front end. Then after the 90-day point, if you want to go through Barnes & Noble and some of those other sources, that's great, because as you mentioned, you can go through Draft to Digital. But the other thing is too, to make sure that book at bare minimum, you have it in Kindle and you have it in paperback. And if you can have an audiobook as well, that's even better.
Yeah.
Because especially for client generation, I've been able to have clients that have listened to the audiobooks, who have read the paperbacks, who read the Kindle. But you want to have it out in all available formats, because one of the biggest changes, and you're probably noticing this as well, is that all these new devices like the Amazon Echo and all these different devices, they also play podcasts, but they also now play audiobooks.
Exactly.
Where you can go, hey, play me this audiobook, and you can have it playing throughout the house.
Yeah, it's grown like 400% in the last year and a half.
Yes, that's what we were seeing. Yes.
Yeah, we actually know someone who has a company who does audiobooks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the industry's changing, and that's a little bit what we talked about your friend Mihal as well, is that we were talking about you have to keep up with the changes in the industry and how it shifts and where it's going next. And that's probably one of the most difficult parts as a self-published author is keeping up with the trends and what's happening next. It's changed so much. I started publishing in 1995, and we didn't have digital back then. And you really lose your way if you don't keep up with what's going on next.
Yes.
Fortunately for me, I have a lot of people on the show, so I learn from people like you, Paul, Joyce, Jen. Anyone who's on the show that's published. I don't care whether they're self-published or they have a company. I'm learning constantly. And I also like the newbie authors or the novice because they come on board with their knowledge, what they just learned, and they'll turn me on to something I hadn't heard about before. And it is important to keep up with all that. You don't want to just go in one direction. And we had talked about putting your eggs in one basket. You don't really want to do that. You want to kind of see what else is going on. Definitely go with what's going the mainstream, but see what else is going on the side. You want to keep up with everything.
Yes.
And Paul, I know you talked a little bit about this with networking, and you talked about your cover with a good teaser and your description of the editor, and then the finely edited book. When you're focusing on that, maybe an issue that you've encountered is when you're networking, you have to be okay with networking yourself also. You as a author, as a publisher, as a manager, are putting yourself out there. You are public now. You have yourself out there to be seen and to be listened to. So you're networking yourself also, not only your podcast or your blog or your book, but you're networking, marketing yourself. Have you kind of encountered those issues yourself?
Well, I think one of the main things is when you're a network, and it's just all about building relationships. And I can tell you one of the greatest introductions you can make is when you get to introduce yourself as a best-selling author, especially at local events, because there's 3 things I've done this year to get more connected locally. Because Arlington's my home. I'm very proud to be from Arlington, and I wanted to build more of a connection. So the first thing I did was join the Greater Arlington Chamber of Commerce. And the reason I mentioned that is because that built relationships. 3 of my strategic partners, those relationships were created in the Chamber of Commerce. One was with a digital marketing agency, and then the other one was with a video production company where we now do monthly live events all over the Metroplex.
Fantastic.
So that was that phase 1 of it. But then what happened is as we built these relationships, we built friendships. And I think that's the biggest thing about networking too. You're not there to pitch. You're there to get to know people, to build relationships, and then the business will follow after that. But what do you do? I'm a publisher. Like, oh, wow. Because in local chamber of commerces, I'm the only publisher typically. So when I get to tell them a little bit, it's like, oh, you publish books? I said, yeah, I purchased them. I've actually published 13 books. I'm a 13-time best-selling author. And then at that point, their jaws just drop. They're like, you're a 13-time best-selling author.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why I really went all in with the Get Published brand, was because that was the name of my book. And I would give this out at events, and I'd actually put an inscription. So I have a little one-on-one. I have a great time meeting someone. I give them an autographed paperback copy of my book, has an inscription, just says, hey, I can't wait to start working with you. I leave my cell phone on there. I give them the paperback copy of the book, and I tell them, you know what? I can't wait to start working with you. Anything I can do to help, just let me know. And when you do that versus just giving a random business card at an event, it is so much more powerful to build those relationships. And you're not pitching. You're just getting to know people. You're building a relationship. You're giving them something of value. I'm a huge believer in giving. That you should give away your content, because what people pay for is implementation. And that's when they come to work with you to get that additional accountability and support.
Yeah, I just had a PR person on not too long ago. His name's Ned Barnett. And what Ned, basically he said exactly what you just said. What he tells his authors to do is when you go out there and you create a seminar or you're going to be doing a conference, is make sure you incorporate that book into that paid seminar.
Yeah.
To where they've purchased it or you're giving it out as part of that lecture, because it's your way of getting the book out there and letting people know about who you are, for one thing. It's expanding your brand. And that's so important. And it's a way to generate sales. You know, it's one of the best ways to really do it. You know, getting out there on the market. And I have to tell you, I recently just published a book, and I kind of did it as a challenge to myself, because I talk about it all the time on the air, but I hadn't done it in a long time other than help other people. And I'm one of those people, one of those persons who can go out there and help you, but I'm not good at promoting myself.
Right.
And I found that I'm actually the person who's shy and afraid to go out there and approach and say things. And that's part of what you have to overcome. It's easy for me to talk about it on the air, and it's easy to get my guests to talk about it on the air.
Yep.
But when you're putting yourself out there, it's a different ballgame.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's about getting out of your comfort zone too. And sometimes you have to do that, where you just need to make those connections. I'll give you a great example. So yesterday I was speaking at a conference, and it was to 75, most of them were college kids, and it was the Motivation 101 seminar. This is what I did to build those relationships. One, we had a great time. I talked about my story, similar to what we're doing today, talking about the journey, and then offering a lot of different motivational tactics. At the very end of it, I asked them if they brought speakers to the universities. Had a bunch of people raise their hand. I said, great. What I'd like to do at the end of the seminar today, come see me. My table's right here. What I'd love to do is give you a free copy of my book, Motivation 101. I would also like to autograph it for you. If you want to take a selfie, that's fine too. But we have a form here we'd love for you to fill out. And it's an intent form that if you want to bring in a speaker like me to your campus, then fill it out and we'll work with you and see what we can do to help. And just by giving that one little piece of value, a book that probably cost me $2 to $3 retail, gave away, I think it's like 10 or 15 of them. We had 15 intent forms filled out. And when we talk to campuses, our rates go anywhere from $1,500 to $3,000 per speech, just based on where the campus is. Because if there's flying or more things involved with hotels, obviously we have to charge a little bit more to cover expenses. But that's just one example of a way that you can network, that you can build relationships, but also how you can monetize your book both on the front end and especially the back end. Because the front end, you make nice money, but you make the life-changing money on the back end with those different offers.
Yes.
And Ned also talked about that, and exactly what you just said, Paul, in that he said you need to get out there and you need to do seminars, you need to do conferences. And Las Vegas is a city that has every day, tons of them.
Yes.
And he said, you'd be amazed at the number of companies who will hire an author to do, a speech or a seminar based on what they've written, and sometimes not even based on what they've written, as long as you have knowledge about publishing or their industry, and then you can present your book at that conference. And he said that's one way of getting out there and really marketing your book. He said it's probably one of the best ways to get out there and get people to know about your book. And we're in the perfect city for it right here in Las
absolutely.
Vegas.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
How many
And I'm
times?
planning to be in Vegas in early December, so let me know about any potential gigs over there, because I'd love to turn it into a business trip.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, December is kind of slow, but it's starting to pick up more and more in Las Vegas. I've noticed over the last few years we're getting more and more conventions in December.
Yes.
But yeah, you can go to the Tourist Bureau of Las Vegas, and they actually list all the conventions that are coming in and out of Las Vegas. Amazon, by the way, is here every year, just so you know, and it's one of the largest now in the city.
Yeah.
See, I'm learning on the show right now. I'm actually typing in some notes as I'm talking to y'all.
Let me tell you something. Amazon spends the money too. I kid you not. One of the hotels I worked at, they used to have an adjoining tent where they would do previews of different things they do, and there was a convention center across this road. They've spent $1 million to build a bridge, a temporary bridge, for 1 week, so that their people can walk across that bridge into that convention center.
$1 million.
$1 million. They spend the money because they have it. And they make their people happy. And you know what? You should check them out, Paul. You might just be able to hook up with them for next year.
Well, just like Paul said, you make money and you make more money and you make the front end money and the back end money.
Right. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Well, and another thing I'd like to mention too is that was just an example of networking I just did with you guys. You were talking about, and I asked, hey, if there's an event, let me know. And that's just the networking example where we're having this great conversation. I'm like, hey, if there's networking, if there's an opportunity to speak, cool, let me know. What would be the route? And you guys just told me going through Las Vegas, the Tourist Bureau. So I think that's just networking one-on-one, where it's just asking questions.
Exactly.
And I think the Venetian Hotel always has something in the first part of December too for authors.
Well, I'm not. exactly sure.
Well, a good idea is what we just had yesterday. Maybe you can tell him a little bit more about.
Yeah, we had the Las Vegas Book Festival, and it's interesting because I actually am going to take advantage of what I learned yesterday from attending. I attended it as an author, and I realize now I probably should have had the radio show there. I probably should have had it set up to where I was interviewing all the authors that were there.
Yeah.
Because there was
Next
probably well
year.
over 50 or 60 authors there. And yeah, next year I'll probably approach them about having a booth there and setting up the show and networking in that way. But yeah, it is interesting how we don't know what's out there until we do it. And like even attending a conference you do, someone's going to meet someone else there that's going to lead them to someone else. And it's amazing. It's a chain reaction, really.
Yep.
But you have to notice it. You have to pay attention to who's there, what's going on. Get business cards. You have to keep it going. You can't just say, here's so-and-so, and that's the end of it. You have to make sure you keep the talk going.
Yep.
Well, and you just mentioned a great idea too, is going to writers' conferences and having your podcast there, doing a recording and potentially hosting a live stream on Facebook.
That's exactly what we talked about doing Google Plus, Facebook, connect them together, do the live show there, but pre-record later on down the road, and even have the author back on, maybe the show, and play a portion of where you were at the conference, and then continue the conversation from there.
Great idea. Love it.
Yeah, I love it.
Yes.
Love it. Love it. Okay, so that is what, October 2019?
I guess so. I'm not sure when the next one would be.
There you go.
But, I learned a lot just as going there as an author. And I needed to do that. I hadn't been out in the public arena as an author in years. And I talk about it, and I realize now that I've been talking about my past experiences. So I'm learning from the new experience now, what it's like to really be out there today.
Yeah.
I had to do a reading a month ago, Paul, and I am petrified. I don't know why, but when I have to go out there and read from my book, I don't know why. It just scares the crap out of me. But what I learned was once I got going and once I start reading, naturally something just takes over, and they said, you did a great job. I'm like, it's an out-of-body experience for me. I don't even know what I'm saying, but I guess whatever I'm saying makes sense because everyone says, oh, you did so good. So, but you have to put yourself out there. You have to do this. You force yourself to do it. And that's what I'm learning. I have to go back out there and force myself to do this again.
Yeah.
I call it showtime and getting in the zone. And I bring this up because yesterday I was in the same mode where within 10 minutes, I went from having 3 people in the room to 75 plus, and they were amped. They were ready. We had the music playing. And then there's just this shot of adrenaline. It's better than any shots of cappuccino I've ever had. Where it just gets straight to you. And it's almost like an out-of-body experience where you're having this amplified conversation, because that's all public speaking is. It's an amplified conversation with a good friend. But instead of having that conversation with 1 or 2 people, you're having it for anywhere from 75 to 200. And just it's almost like an out-of-body experience because you get into the zone. Just like Michael Jordan talks about when he has all those great performances in the NBA Finals, you get into a zone. And that's the easiest way that I can describe it. And that sounds like what you had as well, James.
Yeah, and that's what I'm getting at, too, is you don't be afraid for that to happen. It's going to happen, especially if you are a little bit shy, which I know people say, how can you be shy? You do this every day.
Right.
But I really am when it comes to going out there and do the one-on-one. I remember when I started out with my very first novel and I had to go around and do book signings, I had no one to coach me. I really didn't know how to approach people. I didn't know how to get them to come to my table. And I remember one signing, and actually it was probably the second signing I ever did here in Las Vegas. I was at a Barnes & Noble. And I remember I'm sitting at this table. They had me in the middle of the store. I'm sitting down, and I'm just waiting for people to walk up to me. Well, no one knows who I am.
Right.
Why are they going to walk up and buy my book?
Right.
I did see people circling around, and I think they wanted to approach me, but they probably didn't know how to approach me any more than I knew how to approach them.
Right.
Thank goodness I had a friend whose entire family showed up and stood in line. And then I started noticing because now they were there talking to me. The people who were in the store that had been circling around came and got in line. So you have to talk to people. You cannot be shy and afraid to approach someone. And I'm learning that all over again. I had that experience once, and I guess I need to learn to do it again.
Well, I'm going to tell a story on you because as true as that is for yourself as an author, when I did my first book signing, you were
know.
there talking to every stranger in the world. Hey, did you see that woman over there? Did you see that book? I come over here, take a look at this. Oh, this is really great. Yeah, it was just crazy.
Well, I can do that for someone else. It's easy for me to talk for someone
for
else.
somebody
Yeah,
else. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have to give it away, and then it comes back.
That's
Yeah,
right.
but it is interesting that you say that because I'm very good at doing that for everyone else.
For everyone else, but
I had an
yourself.
author. I was always out front outside the store.
Yep.
People thought I worked for the store.
Yes.
Because I'm out there handing
Carry
out
your
their bookmarks
sign.
saying, oh, here's a free bookmark. And by the way, if you're interested in this author, they're inside doing a signing today. Stop by on your way in. I can do that for someone else.
Yeah.
The hard part's doing it for yourself.
Yes.
Of course. Like we were saying earlier, you're marketing yourself as much as your book.
Yeah.
Yes, you are.
So it doesn't sound like you have too much problem with that, Paul.
Well, and I think one of the main connections is this. There's only thing better than a BLT is a KLT, and that is know, like, and trust. And that's the main thing where you're building relationships, and you don't have to be salesy. I'm not a salesperson. I am a content creation person. And that's one of the main things is to build content, but most importantly is to build strong relationships that it's all about them. It's not about you, where you build the relationships and you actually show a genuine interest and care about other people. Because the best clients I've ever had are the ones I've connected with.
Yeah.
And I think that rings true in any other business as well, is you have to build a connection and it has to be able to click. And I always say, trust your gut. It's like spidey senses, where anytime my spidey senses have ever gone off, they've been a terrible client. So if those spidey senses go off, and that happened at a live event a week ago, where I was like, I'm not going to work with you. One of my partners is like, well, I think we'll try to work with her. I'm like, hey, by the way, we got her for this gig. A day later, she canceled on him because spidey senses, they kicked in. So I always trust my gut. If it doesn't feel right, I don't do it. And I tell my clients, my prospective clients as well, if it doesn't feel right for you, don't work with me, because it has to be a dual-way relationship.
Yes.
I shared with both Jan and Joyce before we went on the air today. I had that exact same experience yesterday, because even though I was there as an author, I obviously had my business cards there as the radio host, because I have a lot of authors who approach the table and they'll see I do a show. And I had someone who came up to the thing, and exactly what you just said, my spidey senses came out. And as this person's talking to me, I'm listening and I'm watching the mannerisms, and I'm thinking, this is not a guest I need to interview.
Right.
And when that person walked away, I thought, that person will not. And it's not to be mean, but it's the way their demeanor and the way that they're demanding, and they're telling me who and how important they are. And they didn't want to give me their business card, but they didn't want to give me, they didn't want to take my business card either. But you just write my name down. You'll know who I am. And I'm thinking, okay, so you won't take my card and you won't give me your card, but I need to write your name down and your number. And, that's truly not a way of making connections and networking. You need to go out there. You need to pass out business cards. You need to introduce yourself to people and tell them who you are and what you do and why. And I get exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. We were at the Alexis Hotel and had people approach us wanting to see if you would do a segment with them. And the vibrations were so good.
Yeah, that was very positive.
Yeah.
People actually came up to us and said, oh, we understand you're doing a podcast, because they allowed us to do a live podcast from Alexis Park. They were doing an inspirational seminar.
Right.
And we went to interview one person specifically.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, they're sharing that we're up there, and then here comes 3 more people.
And they were fabulous. But you got a good vibe from each one of them.
Absolutely.
Because they wanted to know what they could do to make this happen,
Right. It wasn't how important I am, who I am, and it's about me. It was like, oh, this will be fun.
Yeah.
We want to do this.
Yeah. This
Just
would be
like
so
he
cool.
was saying, the know, the like, and the trust.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the most important thing is just you need to talk about the value that you're going to give to the podcast, because you guys work a tremendous amount to make the show as best as possible. You want to have good guests on there. So you should always talk about what the value that you're going to bring as a guest to the show. It's not about you. It's about making the show the best it can be.
Right.
So that's my philosophy.
And I want my guests to shine. I want them to look the best they can possibly look. I don't want them to come on and people go, well, who is this person? Who do they think they are?
Right.
I don't want them to come across that way, because nobody wants someone like that in their life, let alone,
Right. Yeah.
listen to what they have to say. They want
Exactly.
someone who's there to help them, to guide them. And that's what this show's about. It's
Yes.
all about helping authors
Yeah.
from every walk of life.
It's not the big I, little you. It's the big
Right.
you and
right.
I.
Right, exactly.
Well, it's not I and me, it's us and we.
Yes.
exactly.
So there
Yeah.
you go, Paul. There you
And
go.
that's why making the right connections is important, and networking. I won't waste my time with someone like that. Why would I? You might impress other people like who you are, but I'm not interested in that. I want to meet the people who care about other people and other authors and where they're going and help them with their journey. I don't need to know about just you and your journey.
Yes.
I'm glad for you, and I'm glad if you're successful. But that's not the kind of people I want to connect with. I
Right.
want to connect with everyone who wants to help other people.
And it's amazing how many authors we've had on that have said, and I found out about you from so and so and so and so and all the different connections
connected, yes.
and now I listen to your show and this is so exciting.
And that's the key, because it's like what Paul was saying. You want to make connections that are going to help you.
Right.
You don't want someone who's just going to talk about themselves and themselves only, and they're not going to share any with anyone else because
Right.
it's all about them.
Yes.
And there's not that many people out there like that, thank goodness.
Yeah. Right.
But it's like he said, getting those spidey senses, knowing, I need to back away from this.
Yes, for sure.
Well, and I'd be real lucky. We've done 160 some odd episodes, and I've only had 2 guests that were like that. So very lucky with that
Yes.
percentage. And all I did for those 2 episodes, I just didn't promote it very much. I
Well-
still published it, still sent it to them, but I didn't promote the episode. And those were the 2 lowest downloads because I just didn't feel that they were bringing the value to the show. So out of respect for them, I still published it, but
Yeah.
I wasn't going to promote it because it wasn't helping anyone.
It's so interesting you should say that, because I've actually had 3, and I've easily interviewed over 300 authors by now, easily.
Yes.
So,
And I've only had 3, and the one actually came across on the radio because we were live back then. I just happened to have the right guest on. That even though we knew what was going on in the studio, it still came across so great. I mean, it sounded fantastic. And we read through everything. But the funniest thing about it was, Paul, the audience that's listening wouldn't have known this, but he actually had his daughter call in, and we didn't know it was his daughter. And she called in and asked a question that had nothing to do with his book. I didn't have a chance to read his book. I don't have time to read every author's book.
Right.
And he was playing it up like trying to trap us. But we handled it in such a way, because we didn't know where he was going with it, that the audience had no idea. They probably thought it had to do or deal with his book.
Yeah.
So the joke was on him. Whatever he was trying to pull,
Right.
it didn't work.
Yes.
And then behind the scenes, all his antics behind the scenes, nobody saw or knew what he was doing anyway.
Yes.
So you can handle it. You can take a show and you can turn it around. And back then we didn't pre-record, so
Yeah. Whatever we had is
whatever
what we
had is what we had. And so
Yeah.
thank goodness and we actually had Stephen Murray on for that show.
Yeah.
And it was his very first show.
Yes.
So we just had the right guest. And I've had that happen 2 or 3 times where we had shows like that. But I have one show I will never air with a guest.
Oh.
So I will tell you that. So it was kind of wasted time, but at the same time, you know what you need to put out there and what you shouldn't put out there.
Right.
And
Our
And
listeners.
it's funny y'all mentioned that because the reason I bring it, it's just like getting your book out there where you worry about negative reviews and you get so few of them. It's the same thing with hosting a podcast where you worry about having a bad guest, but you might have like 1 bad guest out of every 100 episodes. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
totally worth doing. The same thing with your book. You might get a couple negative reviews here and there, but it's minuscule when 90% plus people are going to love your book. It's that same philosophy. And I noticed when transitioned into podcast, it was that same thing. It was like, well, I'm not going to worry about it. If we get a bad guest on there, we get a bad guest. But being blessed to have 99% of guests just be phenomenal.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
and that I don't even worry.
Absolutely.
I don't worry about it because first of all, I never think about it. I'm gonna be honest with you, Paul. When we do this show and I put it out on the air, I've never, other than the one that I will never air, I never think about what is someone going to say next or what are they going to say
Right.
now. And I think even Mimi mentioned this. Mimi sent me the sweetest letter I've ever received from anyone when it comes to being on my show. And she was so gracious with all her words, but mainly she said she liked the show because we are generic and we just go out there and we say what we really feel, and we get guests on who like you, Paul, who will just talk about, you're generous with your time to do this, Paul. I mean, you don't have to do this.
Yeah.
And, you do have paid seminars and connections that you do that. So I appreciate, anyone who comes on the show like this and talks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, my philosophy is about karma. I truly feel you do good, you help other people, comes back in a wonderful way. But I also feel if you don't do things right, if you don't treat people correctly, that's going to come back on you in a whole different direction. So I am a huge believer in having good karma and just helping people, because what I found makes all the difference in the world, having that philosophy.
Yeah, and that's part of what we're talking about today with making the connections and networking. You have to put yourself out there in a positive way when you're doing that networking and be sincere with what you're trying to accomplish.
And that's your philosophy right there.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, also you were talking about going to the colleges and networking and giving out information with the college students. The karma that you spread that you never know about after you leave is probably multiplied 100,000 times because you've touched so many young lives.
Yes.
Well, and I'll give you a really funny example. So this happened literally right before I went on the show with you guys today. I received a Facebook notification, and it was actually from a young lady named Leslie. And she put a quote up with a picture. And she said, "Here I go being dramatic with a cheesy quote, but I felt 100% relatable this weekend at our lead conference. Don't let the sadness of your past and the fear of your future ruin the happiness of your present." And she said she joined our organization because she wanted friends and to learn about professionalism. But then she said, throughout my years, I've met cool people and even interacted with others that love fashion. And then she said, "Thank you, Paul Brodie, for the Motivation 101 at your seminar." And it just a random thing like that was just so nice to hear, where you got to help someone and you got to brighten their day. And to me, I will take that over anything. The fact that what I do with the books and also the seminars actually helps people. And I think that's the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, Paul, we're running out of time, so we're down to the last few minutes of the show. So please tell our guests where we can learn more about you and what you do.
You can actually go to getpublishedsystem.com or to getpublishedpodcast.com. And we have several ways that we help. We do have a group coaching program. We have a VIP one-on-one coaching program where you work with me for 3 months. We also do a done-for-you book launch marketing service, and we're one of the few companies that really does focus on that. So we do have a proven system. It does work. We also have done-for-you book publishing. But the cool thing is, if you go to the website, you can get a free digital copy of my book, Get Published. You can also listen to episodes of the Get Published podcast. We have 60-plus episodes. They're typically around 15 minutes each. So it's great if you want to binge listen. We have guests on from all over the world, people that have been traditionally published, hybrid, self. The main thing is we have great diversity, and we have nonfiction authors, business books, we have fiction books, children's books, cookbooks, you name it. We just have a great diversity of people that are on the show, just like you guys.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Yeah.
And well, I'd like to thank our guest, Paul Brodie, along with my co-host, Janet Coursey, and our panelist, Joyce K. Gatchenberger. To find out more about our guests, just go to aspectsofwriting.com. You'll find their picture there and links from their picture. There you will also find our past shows. We archive all of our shows on aspectsofwriting.com. We're syndicated on amfm247.com. That show airs at 1 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time on Saturdays. We also put the show up on Blog Talk Radio on Sundays at 9 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time. And we're on Roku TV and several other outlets. Just go to aspectsofwriting.com and learn more. We're on 14 terrestrial stations. And again, just go to aspectsofwriting.com.
One word.
Yeah. And we encourage our listeners to please write and tell us what you think about the show. Let us know what else you'd like us to talk about in the future. So until next time, this is your host, James Kelly, reminding you, if you can dream it, you can write it. Thank you again, Paul, for being a guest.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you, Paul.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.